What was your biggest takeaway from the combine this weekend?
Well, I think Patriots related. It's that they've certainly narrowed their focus to quarterback at number three. And that was the big question. Of course, we know it's their biggest need. But when you've got a draft that had really until the last month when Jaden Daniels' stock started to soar a little bit, he wasn't sure if it was just going to be QBs at 1, 2. And then with all the great options at wide receiver and tackle, they're potentially at three or certainly going to be a run of each position in the top 10. The Patriots had three different avenues that they could explore there, but I think that they are so comfortable with the top three quarterbacks that is the expectation with less than 2 months to go there.
There's a lot of time between now and the draft. There are pro days for each of the top three quarterbacks, but you seem to focus in on which quarterback you think is going to fall to the Patriots at three because you seem to think Washington has a preference at two.
Yeah, I mean, the word around the league is they believe that Washington is leaning toward Drake May, or we know that they really like Drake May. And I think that's sort of the expectation. That's not a huge surprise. Basically everybody I spoke to over the last week, I wanted to get their insight or their opinion on the quarterback class, especially the top three. And the majority prefer May over Daniels, but it's not hard to find somebody who likes Daniels over May. And it's really just a matter of preference, and they're two very different types of quarterbacks. But I think really until the last month, this was looked at as the Caleb Williams, Drake May class until Jaden Daniels kind of worked his way into that conversation. So right now, if I had to have a little mock draft here, Caleb Williams would go 1, Drake May would go 2, and Jaden Daniels would go to the Patriots at 3.
What is all this Baker Mayfield stuff? You mentioned it. You said you said something along the lines of echoing others. The Patriots are really high on Baker Mayfield, although you do think of it as a long shot.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically one of the two most attractive free agent quarterbacks, and the Patriots have some connection to him from their staff from their time together in Cleveland. There is a lot of mutual admiration there. I still think it's better than a 50-50 chance that Baker winds up staying in Tampa. I don't think, just because the Patriots really like him and have a lot of admiration for him, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a realistic option. Now, I also tweeted, never say never, and I'm not trying to couch it because, look, some things could happen where it does make sense for both parties, but I just think because Mayfield's going to have some options in free agency, assuming a deal doesn't get done before then with Tampa. And then you look at the money. I mean, the floor I would expect to be Daniel Jones' deal, 4 years, $160 million. So, and it could get a little bit higher than that. And really, I mean, if you look at the market, that's for that type of quarterback. I mean, you're somewhere between 15 and I got to do the math today, but you're somewhere between 15 and 18 in average annual value because of the way the salary structure has exploded over the last 5 years. So if you're the Patriots, you're rebuilding. Do you really want to put that much money into a free agent quarterback that, is certainly coming off of a very strong season, but doesn't necessarily have the track record to want to get that aggressive with a free agency approach, especially adding in the fact that, again, you're sitting there at 3 and you can get a good quarterback in the draft.
Let's go back to the three quarterbacks that did throw at the Combine, and Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix. And you had a little note on Penix before he threw that a lot of evaluators saw him not as a first-round pick, not even a high second-round pick. You saw him lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, he had a tough go of it in the national championship game. And throughout the season, I mean, just the big arm, the clutch moments, just played really well in a lot of tight spots with Washington. And he impressed a lot of evaluators. And it got to the point where people kind of thought that he was probably a third-round pick who could creep into the second round. And then because he was riding such a hot streak, it was like, okay, well, maybe he gets into the first round if a team is desperate enough that wants to get aggressive and doesn't want to sit there all day Friday waiting for the second round to start. But that was still sort of viewed as a long shot. But then had the nightmare of a game in the national championship where all of the concerns with Penix were really brought to the surface. He was under pressure a lot, and when that happened, the mechanical breakdowns were very evident. He missed, his accuracy waned as a result. I mean, he didn't look like himself at all. but he was taking a beating too, and that's the other part. I mean, he's had 4 season-ending injuries and including 2 torn ACLs. So, what's that going to look like in the NFL? And I think that recalibrated his draft stock back to somewhere closer to the original thought, where it's a guy who might still be able to creep into the second round, but if you're one of those teams that misses out on the top 3, or you can't get JJ McCarthy, you're probably going to get 2 chances to have a decision on Penix based on where you're at in the first couple rounds.
Hey, Jeff, arguably this is probably their most important draft pick in franchise history. And Elliott Wolf says he'll be making the pick here with no job security beyond the draft. What are you hearing on that? And do you think the Crafts will have any, impact, or could they have an involvement in the pick if it is a quarterback?
When you're drafting a quarterback that high, assuming that's the route they go, the ownership at any team is going to have some level of input. It's just such an investment, the face of the franchise, everything that comes with it. The ownership needs to get involved. And again, that's going to be Kraft, or that's going to be the other 31 owners in the league. That's just the way these sort of things go. It's not necessarily like, hey, come watch film with me. This is the direction we're going to go. Are you on board with this player, this person, what you've seen out of him during this process? So it's more of a formality than anything. But in terms of Wolf, I've been saying this for a while. He's very highly respected around the NFL, and was certainly that way last season. I know it was Gareau sort of at the forefront of the front office, but just the amount of respect and admiration the people around the league have for Wolf. He was always viewed as the guy with the higher end of the potential in that front office. So whatever his title winds up being, I mean, the job security is well beyond the draft for him. I would expect him to continue running the front office. Now, the contracts in the front office tend to expire after the draft, so right around May. So I could still see them adding other pieces to the front office, but I would be surprised if it's not Wolf's operation from here on out.
I think it's hilarious. We saw this happen with the Jets, where they let one guy do the draft and then fired him right after and brought in a new GM with no power whatsoever until next summer. I can't see the Patriots doing that.
Yeah, that's not the greatest way to run an organization.
No. So yeah, Wolf is in control of the contracts in the draft. He's going to keep the job. No one would take the job after he's done because he's taking over somebody else's team. Makes no sense at all.
Well, and the other part too is think back to how quickly they hired Gerard Mayo, and they weren't going to hire that's another recipe for a power struggle. If you hire a coach and then you bring in a GM who hasn't necessarily worked with him, or when you stagger it, once off season you hire the coach, the next off season you hire the GM, you're always going to have 2 separate entities in some capacity. They'll sing Kumbaya at the beginning of this whole thing, but once you start losing, once you inevitably face adversity, start looking over your shoulder, and that's when it's job saving season. So you wanted to make sure that somebody in that chair is aligned with Mayo's approach, so Mayo and Wolf have the history together. So it always made sense for it to be somebody familiar, and sticking with Wolf, I thought was the most logical choice all along once they hired Mayo.
It's such a big draft for the Patriots. Anyone else pop out at you at the Combine, Jeff, that non-quarterback related? Because, pick an area of need, and the Patriots almost certainly have it.
I mean, I think I'll stick with the easy ones. I mean, because I focus on the quarterback so much, and knew that, or the buzz around the buzz during the week was that JJ McCarthy was going to pop and his draft stock was going to start to soar on Saturday. And I think that kind of came true. But looking at the other positions, I mean, there's a lot of people really like Marvin Harrison and Neighbors, the other receiver, who's totally different players. But you look at the 2 left tackles, Joe Alt and then Fashanu from Penn State. I mean, franchise caliber left tackles right there. Brock Bowers is viewed as one of the safest draft prospects in years at any position. So if you're sitting there in the top 10, you're going to get a dynamite caliber player in a very important position.
All right. Jeff Howe, we appreciate the time as always. What is your go-to salad? Is it a Caesar? You can't do a chef. Can't do a chef salad. If you're
Cobb
trying to
could be
get healthy.
Cobb. Cobb salad.
Bacon.
No, I'm nice and boring. I'll stick with the Caesar.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's go easy on the dressing. You're trying to get healthy. All right. Appreciate the time, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.
There
See
you
you,
go.
Jeff.
Jeff Howe, NFL national insider for The Athletic.